You have 1 week to leave. My brother grinned smugly across the dinner table, while Mom and Dad just observed in silence. I pulled out the property documents. Actually, you all have 24 hours. Their forks clattered down when I spoke up. Hey, Reddit. Before we begin, I've noticed the channel isn't gaining much attention, and subscribing is the best way to support us. It's quick, free, and truly helps this wonderful community grow. Now, let's start the story. I never thought I'd be betrayed over roast chicken and mashed potatoes, but life has a way of delivering its harshest blows in the most ordinary situations. It was a chilly Sunday evening, the kind where the wind shook the windows and the house smelled of rosemary and butter. I had just finished laying out the dinner table. Mom was near the fireplace, flipping through a crumpled gossip magazine. Dad was watching the evening news, and my older brother Mark was late, as usual, even though dinner was set for 6 o'clock. He walked in at 6:30 with a self-satisfied grin, a fancy watch on his wrist, and a bottle of expensive wine that no one had requested. This house, our family home, had gone through tough times. It had nearly been lost twice. Once during the 2008 crash, and again when my parents were buried in medical bills from Dad's surgery. Mark hadn't been around for either. He was off in Chicago pursuing corporate dreams, only calling when it suited him, never showing up when things got tough. I was the one who stayed. I was the one who juggled 2 jobs, lived in the cramped guest room, and poured every paycheck into fixing the leaky roof, repairing the plumbing, and keeping the mortgage from going into default. I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because someone had to. I couldn't watch our childhood home decay from within. I believed families should look out for one another, even when it was hard. So, when Mark sat down at the table, barely making eye contact, and casually announced between bites that I had a week to move out, I genuinely thought he was joking. You have a week to get your things out. Mom and Dad are getting older. They need peace, not you working from the living room and stressing everyone out, he said, sipping his wine as if he hadn't just dropped a bombshell on my life. I blinked at him, my fork halted midway to my mouth. The words didn't register at first. I glanced at Mom and Dad, waiting for them to laugh or tell him to shut up, but they didn't. Mom stared down at her plate. Dad cleared his throat and mumbled something about the house feeling a bit cramped lately. My heart sank. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Cramped. I paid off the mortgage last year. I said louder than intended. I handled everything while you were busy playing executive in another state. Mark shrugged. You did what any son would do, but it's not about the money now. It's about what's best for them. What's best for them? You haven't been here in years. You didn't even call when Dad was in the hospital. I bathed him, cooked for them, and paid for the damn medicine when insurance refused coverage. You show up, flaunt some fancy wine, and suddenly think you're in charge. Mark didn't flinch. He simply pulled a manila envelope from his bag and slid it across the table. It's already done. I had the lawyer prepare the papers. We're transferring the house back to Mom and Dad's names. They'll decide who stays here, not you. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. The papers were real, but legally structured. Mark was trying to reverse the deed I had legally filed when my parents signed the house over to me 2 years ago as part of the financial restructuring I had arranged. I let out a bitter laugh. You think this will hold up in court? The deed is in my name. I refinanced it under my credit. I've been paying taxes, bills, insurance, everything. This isn't your house, and it hasn't been theirs for years. Mom finally spoke, barely audible. We just want peace, honey. We're tired of the tension. Tension? I echoed, incredulous. You mean my existence? My presence in this house is what you find tense. I looked around the table and saw it clearly. This wasn't spontaneous. This was planned. Quiet whispers behind my back. Late-night phone calls I wasn't included in. Mark had come home not to help, but to reclaim something he felt entitled to, and for reasons I couldn't yet understand, my parents had chosen to support him. I pushed my chair back and stood. You want to talk legal? Fine. I have the receipts, the bank statements, the mortgage documents. This house was a sinking ship, and I rebuilt it from scratch. You think you can kick me out of the home I paid for? You're in for a rude awakening. Mark stood too, trying to loom over me like he used to when we were kids. He was always the golden boy, the star athlete, the charming older son. And I was the quiet one, the bookworm, the backup plan. But I wasn't a kid anymore. And this time, I didn't back down. You're being emotional, he said coolly. Just leave gracefully and spare them the stress. No, I replied, looking him straight in the eye. You have 24 hours to get out. All of you, or I'll have you removed. I'll call the sheriff myself." The silence that followed was deafening. "You're kicking your parents out?" Mom gasped. "I'm reclaiming what's mine. I didn't want it to come to this, but you left me no choice." I turned and walked out, locking myself in my room, heart racing like a war drum. I had no idea what tomorrow would bring, whether they'd leave quietly or fight dirty. But for the first time in years, I wasn't scared. I was done being the good son who kept giving and giving, only to be treated like a tenant in the very home he saved. They underestimated me, and they were about to see just how far I was willing to go to protect what I had built with my own 2 hands. Because this house wasn't just bricks and walls. It was my boundary, and they had finally crossed it. I couldn't sleep that night. How could I? My childhood home had turned into a battlefield, and the people I thought would stand with me had turned their weapons against me. The betrayal replayed in my mind like a broken record. My brother's smug face, my mother's silence, my father's deliberate avoidance of my gaze. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the family photos on the wall. In one, I was 6 years old, grinning as I held Mark's hand at the zoo. In another, we were all gathered around the Christmas tree. Funny how the people in those pictures felt like strangers now. At dawn, I got dressed, grabbed the folder of documents I had compiled over the last 2 years. Every receipt, every tax filing, every proof of payment, and drove straight to my lawyer's office. Mr. Halverson was a kind older man who had guided me through the process of taking legal ownership of the house when my parents were in serious financial trouble. I had refinanced the home in my name to avoid foreclosure, signing a contract that transferred the title to me in exchange for paying off the remaining mortgage balance. When I told him what happened, he didn't seem surprised. "Families don't always fall apart over greed," he said, flipping through the manila folder. "Sometimes they fall apart over entitlement. I'll draft a cease and desist order immediately. In the meantime, you have every right to ask them to leave." By the time I got home, it was noon. Mark's car was still in the driveway. My parents were in the living room as if nothing had happened. Mom was watching one of her daytime dramas, and Dad was reading the newspaper. I stood in the doorway and said flatly, "You all have 48 hours to leave. If you're still here by then, I'll have law enforcement remove you." I'm not joking. My mother looked at me as if I'd slapped her. "You can't be serious. We raised you in this house." "And I saved it," I replied. "You lost the right to call it yours the moment you signed it over, and let me take on the debt alone." Mark stood up, trying again to seem intimidating. "You'd really evict your own parents?" "I already called a locksmith," I said. "By tonight, the locks will be changed. If you want to avoid that embarrassment, you should pack now." He scoffed, but something in my tone must have struck a chord because without another word, he stormed off upstairs. My father followed him, muttering under his breath. My mother just sat there, shaking her head. "I loved you so much," she whispered. "No," I replied. "You loved what I did for you, not me." That night, I had the locks changed. I installed a security system and a camera over the front door. I didn't sleep again, but this time it was from exhaustion, not fear. The house was quiet for the first time in years. Not peaceful, but quiet. Still, I could feel the weight of what was ahead. The next morning, they began packing. It was surreal watching my parents carry boxes out of the home I had saved with blood and sweat. I offered them no help, and they never asked. Mark was the last to leave. He stood at the doorway, looking around as if trying to memorize the place. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes, it is," I replied. "You ended it the moment you tried to take it from me." He let out a bitter laugh, but didn't argue. He walked away, and I closed the door behind him. For the first time in my life, I locked it with a sense of finality. The following weeks were the loneliest I've ever experienced. Word spread quickly through the extended family. Some sided with me, but most didn't. I was labeled cold, heartless, ungrateful. My uncle even sent me a lengthy message about how, regardless of what had happened, evicting my parents made me a monster. I didn't reply. What no one seemed to understand was that I hadn't chosen this. I hadn't wanted any of it. I had given everything to this house, this family. I had watched them struggle and stood in front of the storm to protect them. I didn't do it for power or control. I did it because I believed we were in this together. But they weren't. And when someone shows you they're willing to throw you out the moment you stop being useful, you learn to stop setting yourself on fire to keep them warm. One day, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from my mother. The handwriting was still the same, soft and looping like the notes she used to leave me in my lunchbox during elementary school. I opened it slowly. It wasn't an apology, not even close. She wrote that she forgave me for what I had done and hoped I would someday come back to my senses. She said she and my father had moved in with Mark, who had a spare room in his city condo. She mentioned it was tight but manageable. She finished the letter with, "We still love you, even if we don't understand you anymore." I crumpled it and tossed it in the bin. I didn't need forgiveness from people who had never asked for mine. I didn't need to be understood by those who had never tried to understand me. Weeks turned into months. The silence from my family stretched on. Holidays came and went with no cards or invitations. I spent Christmas alone in the house I had saved. I decorated it anyway, put up lights, cooked myself dinner, sat by the fireplace, and read a book. And you know what? It was peaceful. Eventually, I transformed the guest room into an office and the old attic into a studio. I started working full-time from home, growing my own business. Every wall I painted, every shelf I mounted, every creak I fixed, I did it for me, not for approval or recognition. For the first time, this house felt like mine in more than just name. It felt like home. I still think about them sometimes. I wonder if they miss me. I wonder if they ever realize what they lost. But I don't reach out. I don't check their social media. I don't answer when Mark's number lights up my phone every few months because I know now that love without respect is just manipulation wrapped in a bow. And I've learned that sometimes choosing peace means choosing to walk alone. This house was built on more than just foundation and timber. It was built on sacrifice, loyalty, and effort. And no matter what anyone says, that can never be taken away.